Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another session of the Second Tuesday Photo Huddle. Watch for more from the Second Tuesday Photo Huddle on the West Michigan Photography Enthusiast group on meetup.com. The West Michigan Photography Enthusiast group is sponsored by the Southwestern Michigan Council of Camera Clubs, swmccc.org.
We're going to hear from Mike talking about fun with oil and water. I'm going to jump right into Mike Mitchell. Mike, there you go. Kitchen Abstracts, Fun with Oil and Water by Mike Mitchell.
I've been doing this for a little bit. It's kind of a fun thing to do. It's real easy, as you'll see from the presentation. We'll go on to the next slide. You can do all kinds of variations. You shoot a lot to get a few nice ones, but it's still fun. And we'll talk about how we get all this.
So how are we going to do this, Mike?
Okay, so I think what I'll do is just talk about what we need to have to do this with. So the first thing you're going to need is your camera. You need your camera with some kind of lens that you can focus close with, either a zoom lens, or if you go to the next slide, I've got an example of the camera with my macro lens on it. I personally like to use the macro lenses because you can focus a little closer. Most macro lenses will let you do 1-to-1, which is like life size. That's why I would go with the macro lens rather than the zoom lens with the macro mode. Both of them work.
So Mike, what you're looking for then, some kind of a setup that's going to allow you to get some good magnification, but you want to be reasonably close to your subject, because you're going to find that we're not looking at a big thing in the first place. And so you don't want to be 3 feet away.
I think what it is if you go with the macro mode in a zoom lens, you might not be able to get in as close as you want to. But the thing about it is, you can always crop in a little bit too if you need to. That's another option there. Another thing you need is a tripod. There's some tripods out there that are nice that the center column comes out. You can kind of overhang your camera out over. Those are kind of nice for this kind of thing. The big thing about your tripod is you want a tripod that's big enough that you can straddle over the little set we're going to build. You want to be able to shoot straight down, so you want to be able to get in as close as you can overhead. I mean, some of these little tiny tripods probably just won't cut it. So you need a fairly tall tripod to do this.
So you're trying to build a rig setup almost like a copy stand so you can point your camera straight down at your subject. Is that what I'm hearing?
Actually, if you have a copy stand, you could probably use that instead. You could just set the dish and everything right on the board of the copy stand and put the camera on the copy stand and shoot down. That probably would work. That's assuming you have a copy stand.
Yeah, the rig that you're building is effectively a copy stand anyhow. It's just lit a little bit different.
Much. Okay, the next thing, this is a good option. The thing about it is since you want to be able to look in through your viewfinder, so you don't want your camera to be too high off the ground. A lot of times I'll build little sets using these little plastic milk crate things that you can get. The nice thing about them is they stack up. You can kind of raise the height of your little table. I'll show you that farther on in the slideshow. You'll see how I got this set up, and it'll make more sense. The other nice thing about these crates is you can put weight in them, give it a little more stability. You can go on. Because the next thing you need is something to shoot through. It needs to be clear glass. I've used pie plates and stuff like that. The one thing you want to kind of be aware of is a lot of this glass dishes and different things like that, they have things stamped in the bottom. That'll show through. But a lot of times you're around the edge where you don't see it. Do the next one there, Mikey. This is 3 pieces of foam core. These particular dimensions are 6 by 9. I cut 3 of them. You want to make sure they're nice and square, then butt them up, and I taped them with clear packaging tape. This is going to be my stand that's going to hold the dish. What this is a picture of a piece of glass. This is just an 8 by 10 piece of glass. And I'm going to put this on top of the little stand thing that I made. And then on top of that, I'm going to put my clear dish. You'll see what I'm talking about, how this all goes together in just a little bit. In all those pictures, you saw the color and everything. And how you do the color is, since you're shooting through the oil and water, through this glass bowl, you want something of different colors underneath. But you want them out of focus. You just want the color, kind of colored blobs. You don't really want anything too distinct. These are just backgrounds that I made by blurry images and then printing them out on paper. These just happen to be like 4 by 6 prints because they don't really need to be too big, but they could be on 8 by 10 paper. You just want to be able to put them underneath and then move them around to kind of look at different colors and everything. The other thing too I've used in the past is things like strips of ripped like construction paper of different colors. and put those underneath. Just about anything that has color in it that's relatively flat will work because they're going to be way out of focus. So you see these different blotches of color. What's nice about these is you can print them all kinds of different ones, so you got a lot of variations in your background. Obviously, you need oil and water. Well, water is pretty much the same. I tend to like to use vegetable oil. And the reason I like to use vegetable oil is I've used some other oils, but this vegetable oil seems to be a little more viscous, a little thicker. So the blobs kind of seem to stay together a little bit more. And we'll talk about making the blobs in a little bit. The other thing that's really handy is you need something to kind of manipulate the oil on the top of the water. What I found is little tiny paint brushes. I like this wider one, got like an eyedropper, and I also use that little syringe. What's nice about that is you can suck some of the oil up out of the water and then just kind of drop in the area that you're shooting, just kind of drop. The harder you push it, the bigger the drops are. It's just kind of nice, so gives you a little bit of variation in what you're shooting. And this is really important. Paper towel or a towel, especially when you're pulling that brush in and out of that water, it's messy. So you just want to make sure that you have plenty of stuff to kind of mop things up with. Don't do it in an area where there's carpeting. I dumped one of these over one time, but luckily I was on a hardwood floor. That was hard enough to clean up. I can't imagine what it would have been like in carpeting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lighting here, give you some idea of how you can do it. It really is pretty simple. First thing you can use is speed light. The only thing about it is you're not going to have it on your camera. You're going to have it off camera, and you have to have some way to trigger it. There's some different ways to do that. And one way is they make these really inexpensive triggers. One of them is a transmitter. The one on the right side is the transmitter, and that slides into your hot shoe. The thing on the left, there's a hot shoe there that you slide your flash into. If you see the little blue patch there with a couple switches, you can set these for different channels. Why that's important is, say if you're in a room where there's multiple setups and there's other people with the same kind of equipment, you can be on channel 2 if they're on channel 1. And that way you won't be triggering their lights and they won't be triggering yours. So like I say, this is a pretty easy way to do it. Go to the next. All this is extension PC cord. It runs from your camera to your flash. That's assuming that your flash will take an external cord. That way you can get your flash off your camera, off to the side like we're going to set up. These aren't too expensive.
Some lower end flashes or newer flashes won't have that PC connector. There are other adapters you can use. There's also the TTL cords that you can get that will basically, it's just an extension cord from your camera to your flash unit. But those are usually a lot more expensive than those radio triggers.
Right, they are. The nice thing about those is it retains your TTL function, where when we go this way, we have to shoot our flash in manual. And I'll talk about that
Same with
bit
those,
when we talk about setup.
And same with the lower end radio triggers are manual. And by the way, just as a reminder, TTL stands for through the lens metering.
Next slide. Here's another option. This is a good app. If you got a clamp lamp or even a desk lamp, anything really, because we're just going to set it next to the side there. This happens to be just an LED bulb. You'll see it in a bit how I had it set up. So you just get it in close to illuminate your background. When you start playing around with moving the oil around and everything like that, you kind of got to let it settle so you don't get any motion blur. Where if you're using the flash, the nice thing about the strobe is the flash will stop the action. So it's not, you don't have to worry about that blur that you'll have by using like a lamp.
Just as a programming note, in the future, we will be doing an off-camera flash, just as a real quick setup, how you can trigger your flash off your camera different ways. So look for that here down the road.
Go to the next slide, Mike. Here's another option. If you've got a big window in a room, just set your setup close to the window. I tell you what works really well is if you've got a big, like a sliding door or French doors or something like that. So you get a lot of the daylight come in. The only other thing I'd like to say about this watch, so you don't get a lot of extra movement, is you want to be able to shoot fairly stop down, and you want to get the fastest possible shutter speed you can. If you're using a flash, you don't really worry so much about your shutter speed because the flash duration tends to be your shutter speed. If you're in a really bright room with the big windows, you're going to get a lot more light in. It'll let you shoot faster. Your camera's going to be on the tripod anyway. Okay, so now we'll go through just a rundown and how to set these different things up. So I used 2 of the crates, one stacked on top of the other. Then I put the top on so that I got the surface to work on. And the nice thing about these crates is they're pretty compact. You still got a nice area to put your dish and everything on, but it's easy to get your tripod out over there. So here's my little stand that I made. One nice thing about this is too, because I made it out of white, the inside's more reflective and it'll bounce more of the light back onto my little backgrounds. Just put my little piece of glass up there on top, your dish on top of that. And that's pretty much what you're going to work. Basically, the next couple shots are putting the water and the oil in. You don't put very much. You put maybe a quarter to a half inch of water. I usually put the water in first, then the oil, just a little bit. I kind of just drizzle it in so I get some blobs. And you're going to play with it a little bit later anyway. So put your backgrounds in underneath, whatever you're going to use for color, and set your camera up.
Mike, do you recommend using manual focus when you're doing this?
Oh, yes. I'm glad you said that. I use manual focus pretty much. Anytime I'm doing macro stuff, I use manual focus.
What about your aperture? Okay. Are you looking to keep the sharper detail? What do you normally play with the aperture if you're doing the continuous light like you're going to be showing here?
Now, when you're this close, your depth of field is going to be pretty small. You can shoot at f8 or f11. It'll give you plenty of depth of field through the oil and water. I'd say a minimum of f8, f11 is a good range. The background should not be sharp at all. If you got a lens that creeps, either by the focus or the zoom, get yourself some of that tape, that blue tape, that painter's tape. Once you get your focus in, tape your lens so it don't go out of focus or zoom out. But you'll get that pointing your lens down sometimes, especially on older lenses. So in here, I put my flash, I just set it on the table.
You can see the trigger right there, and you can see the receiver right there on the flash unit.
I'm using the little brush here to kind of play around with my little bubbles and stuff. Same thing here. I'm using my little syringe to kind of suck up some of the oil and shoot little bubbles back into it.
And now you've moved to continuous light.
Yeah, just to show you as an example of how I had the continuous light set up.
The next one is the video. This is a completely different setup. This was with Mike and Dan Sack and I playing around. There we go.
Thanks, Mike, for stepping us through that. I hope you all enjoyed it. Now look for more from the Second Tuesday Photo Huddle. Be sure to check out the West Michigan Photography Enthusiasts on meetup.com. The West Michigan Photography Enthusiasts Meetup Group is sponsored by the Southwestern Michigan Council of Camera Clubs. That's swmccc.org. Look for more at their website for upcoming information on our annual conference. And you can find me at michaelcool.com.